Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Together, we'll explore and enjoy content and conversations around mastering transitions in our relations, our wellness, our careers, our families, and especially in our missions and visions. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a new neighbor and a new friend and a very gifted author, teacher, guide, Ayurvedic counselor. Claire Ragozzino is how I want to say your name because I've lived in Italy. Ragozzino. And I want to welcome you first to the podcast. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And I just want to teach my listener a little bit about you before I start waxing poetic about your gorgeous book. Claire is a certified yoga instructor and Ayurvedic counselor. She has a background in holistic nutrition and natural cooking. Her work is dedicated to bringing yoga, Ayurveda, and nutrition to our very sorely modern lifestyle. She's the author of the very popular site called Vidya Living. If you don't know how that's spelled, it's V as in Victor, I, D as in David, Y-A, Living. And she writes and also photographs for online and print publications on topics of food and culture and our relation to nature. It's really nice, Claire, to finally speak to you in person and not just over the interwebs.
Absolutely.
Claire's book is beautiful. If you haven't seen it, I want you to go look it up right now. It's called Living Ayurveda. I'm holding it in my hands and I'm not letting go of it. During this podcast, you're going to hear me like turning pages and breaking the back of the book. Her photographs are epic, so inspiring. And if you're really done with how your house feels, you're done with how your diet feels, you're done with how your body feels, I swear, this is a really solid foundational place with which to begin. Living Ayurveda is, it reminds me of my favorite aspects of working on art of attention. Because you went sort of to a very, what do I want to say? It's so editorial. And it's local. Like now that I live in Santa Fe, I feel all the local vibrations in this book. It's completely here. What is Ayurveda and how can you begin to make sense of this wisdom is literally the first line of the book after the introduction. And you say that you like to think of Ayurveda as a language. Listener, hear me. Ayurveda as a language that helps us describe the natural world and our relationship to it. Claire remembers living in Paris and trying to learn French, and at first the language was difficult to grasp and to translate, and then she started taking yoga classes at a nearby studio. Since she knew what the different parts of the body and breath were in the yoga sequences, she started to learn French from doing yoga en français, and it became more intuitive when she applied it to her own physical experience. This is exactly how she recommends approaching Ayurveda, which I love, and we're going to talk about this now. You take in the information slowly. Don't get it too heady. Don't get hung up on all the Sanskrit words and concepts, and instead just look at the ways in which you can identify the qualities of the elements, the doshas, in your own body and mind. And then the concept slowly becomes second nature. I truly appreciated that. Is that a metaphor? A simile? Metaphor? I don't even know. But it's amazing. It's exactly how it should be with any topic, but especially with Ayurveda, because I found myself moving away from it years ago because it was like I took one class and I was just like, whoa. It's just too much information. I don't feel like it all applies to me. And when I started to look through your book and I started to see I really was more pitta in New York. I'm now more vata. like I can see how things shift, and I can intuit what would be of most benefit right now and even back then. So I want to thank you for simplifying it. How did you find Ayurveda personally?
Yeah. Well, for me, I've had a long journey of struggling with my digestion and started in my early teens. And I saw doctor after doctor, and they had no answer. And I had upper GIs and lower GIs. And this was kind of pre the green wave of our eating and the organic craze. And in high school, I actually lived on a small island in Alaska. There wasn't a lot there, but there was one health food store. And I would spend every day after school reading all the books on their little library shelf. And one of them was Healing with Whole Foods with Paul Pitchford, which really digs into macrobiotics and touches in a little bit on Ayurveda. And then I found Dr. Laud's really simple, basic primer. It's called Ayurveda, Science of Self-Healing. And
Can we spell Dr. Lad first? I want to just say his name is Dr. Vasant, Vasant, Lad, Lad. And if you are going to go to, one of the sources, this is a great one to start with. Thank you.
yeah, he does a brilliant job translating the esoteric of Ayurveda, the very practical medical science of Ayurveda, and then really applying it to the mind of a Westerner. Yet, at 16, it was still way over my head. And then again at 19, when I discovered it again, it was still overwhelming. I couldn't understand how to apply these terms to my life. And so I was practicing a lot of yoga at the time, and I really wanted to get to know the sister science, but I kind of kept returning to, more modern approaches to diet and gut health. And there's no shortage of information on diet and gut health out there right now. So much so, it's really overwhelming. Just as
Yeah,
overwhelming as I
it is.
found Ayurveda. Don't eat fat, don't eat carbs. Take this probiotic, don't take that probiotic. You need this enzyme, not that enzyme. And I would say I kind of surfed the waves of trends for many years. And then I found myself working as a raw food chef, still trying to heal my digestion into my 20s. And I was living in the Midwest at the time, and there was a raw food culinary school I was working at. And there I was eating all, the best enzymes, the best superfoods, these big smoothies. I'd make these like 32-ounce smoothies in a mason jar and then sit on a hot pack and tell myself in the middle of winter I was doing the right thing. But I still struggled with my digestion, even though I thought, from my head, this was the way to live. And so it was actually a bowl of soup. And I wrote about this in my introduction. It was a bowl of soup from a new boyfriend at the time who said, why don't I cook you a nice soup? And I remember thinking, God, I can't eat that. It's not raw. It doesn't have all the
Mm-hmm.
best this
Mm-hmm.
and that in it. And it was December, and there I was eating raw kale salads and superfood smoothies and pineapples and cashews in the Midwest. I mean, it couldn't have been more disconnected from nature. And I was living from my head so much. But it was this bowl of soup that was kind of my light bulb moment. I ate a bowl out of respect, and he'd spent so much time cooking it and put so much love into it. And I ate that bowl of soup, and it was like my whole body said, hell yes. I could feel that knot in my stomach softening, and I had another bowl, and I felt great. And I thought, what is this cooked food wizardry? And in that moment, I'd been reading a lot of Ayurveda. I'd even gone to India. I'd spent time in southern India, the birthplace of Ayurveda. I'd studied it, but I wasn't living it. It was still concepts. And there was something about that bowl of soup that shifted how I approached my health that day forward. At the time, I was practicing very intensive Ashtanga yoga. I had a bulging disc in my L4, L5. And I
Oh my
remember
God.
feeling so agitated, like,
Ugh.
practice through the pain. You're not doing yoga if you're not doing primary and second series. And very much so, I approached my nutrition and my whole body health in that same way of control and manipulation and hard discipline and not a lot of grace, not a lot of nurturance. And there was something about that loving, warm bowl of soup that kind of melted my rigidity, that kind of melted this harsh walls of my mind. And those words that I read from Dr. Laud started to kind of seep in a new way. It wasn't just, here's how you're supposed to eat for your body type. You are this dosha. It was, oh, here's what the doshas are. Here's what the elements look and feel like. And then if you're feeling very cold and dry, why not balance it with something warm and oily and hot like a soup? And so that soup then kind of initiated this whole new approach to my studies. And I started to really pursue Ayurveda as my main well that I wanted to dig deep. And so for the last decade or so, I've been going deeper into my Ayurveda studies and looking at how to live with a little bit more grace and awareness of these natural rhythms that Ayurveda can teach us.
My listener and I need to know what was in that soup.
Oh, gosh, it was like sweet potatoes, something, something. I don't know. It was just delicious. And soup's like a mainstay in my diet now.
And you have some soup recipes in your book, obviously.
I do. I do have a great fennel kabocha red lentil soup that I love, and some other fun ones for wintertime now.
Oh, good. Because I was thinking about making the fennel kabocha one tonight, but then if you have a better recommendation for winter.
Make that one. It still applies. It still
It still
applies through the
applies?
season. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The beet tartlets are on my list for later this week.
Those have been a popular one this week. I've seen a couple friends making those. It's really fun.
Yeah, I'm
Less
super excited.
traditional Ayurveda, I'll say, but still fun.
Mm-hmm. No. So what? It's like, I'll be totally frank. I've been raw. I've been vegan. I've been utterly anorexic at 17. All of these things are very familiar storylines for me.
Mm.
And when I look at the savory beet tartlets, I go, oh, this satisfies every one of those little girls inside of me. Like, there's a cake involved, there's sort of a sweetness, and there's also your beets, the veggies, the word savory, and the word tartlet in the same breath. I'm in.
I love it.
I appreciate also the mung soup recipe. The braised winter greens taught me a lot about how to cook that stuff. I didn't realize the black eyed pea and pumpkin stew. So many good things.
You know,
Obviously, I'm talking to you in the dead of winter. So these are the things that I'm kind of swooning over. When it comes to the seasons, and I also appreciated that you have a really nice yoga practice in there for each one of these times of the year. When it comes to the seasons, though, can you speak a little bit, and I'm just going to be quiet for a little while, speak a little bit about what each season kind of represents and how we're to respect the seasons in terms of how we treat our body and what we put into it?
no, that's a great question. I think seasons are not necessarily definitive. A lot of this depends on your environment. So we're both living in the high deserts of New Mexico, where there's a lot of air and space. Everything is vast and open. It's often windy, it's dry, it's cold. So that would be this more vata type environment that we would pay attention to. Yet, as you move through the course of the year, you'll notice there are pretty distinct seasons here. But say you're living in the tropics. I used to live on Kauai for several years, and there's like 1.5 seasons there. So a lot of what you're doing with Ayurveda is paying attention to these subtle shifts in your surrounding environment. And that can be marked by the 4 seasons of our calendar year, looking at the spring equinox, the summer solstice, the fall equinox, and the winter solstice. And that's kind of how I divided this book. But in classical Ayurveda, there's actually 6 seasons, because there's a rainy season and kind of a post-monsoon season in India. So this body of knowledge does come from India, yet it really is applicable anywhere you are, because it's understanding these kind of universal laws, these principles of nature. And I think so much we rely on now is apps and technology telling us when we're going to menstruate, when we should sleep, how well our sleep was, like every aspect of life is kind of plotted out by technology. And I love this wisdom of Ayurveda because it teaches us how to pay attention. I call it a language because it allows us to understand what's happening around us and how that's influencing what's happening within us. And so the book is divided into 4 seasons because it's written here in North America, and many of us are reading it here in North America, or in the Northern Hemisphere, I should say. And how we start to pay attention, and when we start to pay attention to these changes, we do notice how we do have a rainy season. In springtime, in late winter, really, in another month or two, all the snow is going to start to melt, the rain's going to move in. You're going to notice an increase of the water element. And there's going to be kind of a denseness, there's a slowness. When you come out of winter, sometimes we feel dull. Winter is sometimes called the season of the sleepy bear, this hibernation time. It's a time where eating richer foods, when we have the digestive capacity, eating richer foods and doing more rigorous exercise is great because it balances out that water and earth element of kapha dosha. And so you can see as we move from this late winter phase into spring, we want to start to adjust our diet to balance that as well. So what felt really nourishing, those heavy, thick soups and stews, those, more hibernating type practices don't feel so great come springtime. And that's naturally when we want to start lightening up to bring balance. So this idea of like increases like is a really practical way to look at doshas versus reading a chart and saying, I'm kapha dosha, I should just eat this. We look at the seasons because it helps us to understand what's happening in the now. And this is where I think Ayurveda can get a little stagnant, is when we just start to type ourselves. You might take a dosha quiz online, and then all of a sudden you're following everything you should do for pitta dosha because that's what your quiz results were. So that's called your prakriti. This is your unique body type at birth. This is kind of your inner compass of balance. And everyone has their own unique makeup, influenced by their parents' genetics and constitutions, the type of birth you had, your early childhood experiences. All of that kind of imprints to create this unique soup of you called your prakriti, your body type. And that's how Ayurveda is presented a lot. But what we miss out then is then we start relying on charts and apps and things telling us what to eat and what to do, but we miss the beauty of paying attention to what's happening in the present moment. So living with the seasons allows you to pay attention to what's happening around you and different breath practices, different movement practices. It doesn't have to just be asana. It can also be, if you're a runner, how you're running, how you're approaching caring for your body and your mind has subtle changes so you can stay in balance with the time of year. So when I was a raw food chef eating kale salads and cashews in the dead of winter, I was actually aggravating my digestive imbalances by eating too many cold and dry foods. I already had enough cold and dry in my body, enough vata dosha. And so as we move through the year from spring, where we want to kind of lighten up, we want to do more active movement practices, we want to do more energizing breath practices, we want to eat foods that nature provides, like sprouts and green things and the bitter astringent taste to help kind of naturally cleanse and get the juices of the gallbladder and the liver going, to help us to just naturally reduce some of that heaviness we feel from the earth water element. Now, as we move to summer, it's hot. What do we want to do? We want to cool down. So going to a hot base blasting yoga class, a heated class might be kind of aggravating, especially if you're someone who already has a lot of fire in their constitution. So summer is dominated by pitta dosha. This is the fire element predominantly with a little bit of water. And we want to eat foods that are around us, like juicy melons, ripe fruits, leafy greens and things like this. The bitter, the astringent, and the sweet tastes help us to naturally cool the body down. This can also come from, cooked whole grains or even summer type soups. But we're not eating that heavy stews and lots of heating spices like peppers and ginger, garlic and onions in the summer, because it could fan those flames a little too high. And so we do practices like sitali, helping to cool the body down through the breath. We pay attention to our level of intensity, because that fire element is what can get us super intense and critical, self-critical, or critical of everyone around us. We can become too competitive. These are aspects of pitta when in excess. And then as we start to shift into fall, fall is vata time of year, this time where the air and space elements rush in. And you see that with things drying up. Your garden starts to dry up, the leaves start to change, the winds increase. And equally, this is a time when you have too much vata, you can start to feel spacey. You can start to feel ungrounded, disconnected from yourself, fearful, anxious. All of these are signs that doing practices that bring in those opposite qualities to decrease that increasing air, the mobility of air, that vastness of space. We want to do practices that are grounding, stabilizing, calming, that support the nervous system. And so we want to also eat foods that mimic that as well. The sweet taste, the sour taste, the pungent, little bit of pungent, and the salty tastes help us to all balance some of those rising airy qualities. And it's so simple once you really give it a try. And some of these things that you might notice through the course of a year, like I had a client once who said, every year since I had my child and I moved to a new state, I am gripped with anxiety every fall. Come October, I can't even function. And with just a couple little shifts in how she was approaching her food, breath, and movement practices, she was able to subside and calm that anxiety. And it didn't take a whole revolution of what she was doing. It just took simple little shifts that she could apply in her everyday. And I think that's where the power of diet and lifestyle come into play with Ayurveda, is that it has a cumulative positive effect when you learn how to pay attention and apply this wisdom of the changing seasons, of the changing elements and doshas to your body and mind.
Yeah, I feel that. I think what's most important is the willingness to get a little brave and cook things that you don't normally cook.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spices and things that we are not used to in this country or in Italy or in France or in even Greece, wherever. And to get accustomed to and even masterful with fenugreek and coriander and black lentils and asafoetida and all the things that we use in this sort of cooking. I feel like so empowered by your book because it lays everything out in a very simple way. I can make dosa. I can make mung bean. I'm blanking on the word right now. Oh my God. Kitchari.
Kitchari.
Oh my God. Kitchari. But those things, I never would have felt comfortable making them. And now your book has helped me kind of be like, all right, I could do that too. It takes 30 minutes and I'm going to rock it. And it's really nice to get to know these different spices and feel them in my body, most importantly.
And I think too, yes, Ayurveda comes from India. Yes, a lot of the traditional cookbooks have an Indian cuisine influence just because of by nature where it comes from. But you can absolutely cook your favorite Italian dishes with Ayurvedic principles. I think we think everything has to be dal or everything has to be vegetarian. This is a big one. The classics of Ayurveda don't actually say don't eat meat. They say eat meat medicinally, and here's how these different animal proteins will affect your body and mind, will affect the doshas. It's about really breaking down the six tastes and understanding how, let's say something like a hot dog with mustard, right? Mustard is pungent, has a heating taste, it has the fire element. What does it do? It helps to increase digestibility of something. And so, a hot dog and mustard is a silly example, but even just having that mustard adds a familiar taste to something in a Western palate while also increasing the digestibility of it. So everything that we're doing is about preparing our food and preparing our bodies to receive what we're cooking. And I say if you're really unfamiliar with these spices, go with the familiar. Garlic has a similar effect. And if garlic you're finding is too heating for you, a pinch of asafoetida, which is also a pungent spice, is another way to introduce that pungent taste into your diet and try a new spice that has a similar flavor to onions and garlic. I just, my intro to the book is all about being a curious observer. And I think when you can approach something not as you have to do all of this right, you have to cook the mung beans exactly in this way, but to be playful with it, to have fun, to try something new and say, like, for this month, I'm just going to try cardamom in my oatmeal, see what it tastes like.
Cardamom is the best thing that ever happened to me.
You know what?
Oh my God.
I travel with cardamom.
Of course. No, of course. I bring the essential oil wherever I go, and I use it on my belly when my belly is upset.
Mhm.
Diluted. Oh my God, it's the best thing. So fast. It works in moments.
Yeah, so there's all these different ways to get to know these spices, to get to know these ingredients, to get to know, how does my stomach feel when I eat this way? How does my mind feel when I do this type of meditation or this breath practice? I think the more that we can just play with it and try things out, the more realistic it becomes in your daily life.
Yeah. Chapati. Can I make those with gluten-free flour? I was waiting to interview you to ask you.
Totally. Yeah. I've made
Okay,
chapati
cool.
before with a mix of brown rice and quinoa flour is one combo. I even have a note in the bottom of that recipe on variations for making a gluten-free version.
Okay, perfect. And then the
Chaiwan
Chiawan
prash.
Prash. Please help me because I need to make these truffles like yesterday. Where do I get that Chiawan Prash? Should I just get it on Amazon?
One of my favorite companies is actually called Lotus Blooming. Lotus Blooming
Yes.
Herbs, and they make a really nice chavanprash. It is super fresh. It has their kind of traditional formula made at a specific lunar time or lunar cycle
Mm.
time of the year, and with all of the herbs and honey and
Mm-hmm.
it's very sweet. It's called a rasayana, meaning it helps to build up our juice a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is super important when you've been depleted. And I think we can all fairly say we're kind of running on half empty in our society most of the time. And,
Right.
cleansing has gotten super popular. When I first started my business a decade ago, I was doing raw foods and juice cleansing all the time, but I was missing that important aspect of the cleanse, which is to rebuild the body after you cleanse. And so we don't continue in depletion. Cleansing is all about lightening and wicking away and taking things away from the body. And
Mm-hmm.
that Rasayana period is so important to help rebuild our strength, our vitality, our ojas. And Chavanprash is a traditional herbal jam that's included often in this Rasayana process. And so these little truffles are like fun snacks or alternatives to dry packaged health food bars or energy snack bars, and they can be made in advance. And they're like kid approved too. I've had a couple kids improve them.
Right. Right. Kid approval is very important. I'm also going to rock the Kitchari burgers in the next week, which I'm excited about.
Awesome. Kitchari has kind of become the poster child of Ayurvedic eating. And again, it's not all just about Kitchari, but Kitchari is an awesome dish for boosting your digestive fire if you've eaten a lot of complex foods or have been traveling and your stomach feels a little off. Kitchari is a great one pot meal that you can make. It's usually made from yellow split mung beans, mung dal, and then basmati rice and spices. And you can do super simple spices. You can play around adding more spices to it. I have a couple seasonal variations in the book to check out. But if you've ever done a Kitchari cleanse, the last thing you want to do is eat another bowl of Kitchari when you're bored. So I loved the Kitchari burgers because it's a fun way to play around with what you would normally put in that one pot, but shape them into a little patty and add some chutney on top or try something different. The
Yeah.
sushi
Yeah.
rice is what binds it together. That's an important component to that one.
Which I weirdly happen to have because we've started to make our own sushi, which is the most ridiculous thing.
That sounds great.
James, my boyfriend, has like a weird facility. He used to go back in the day when he lived in New York, and he knew a sushi chef. He would go eat at this restaurant, and then the sushi chef would let him come in the back and learn how to roll rolls.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I'm the hand roll girl.
Nice.
I'm killer at hand rolls. And he like slays a maki roll. So we have sushi rice in the house, which is why I want to make the Kitchari burgers.
Got to drive down for dinner at your house. That sounds great.
Dude, let's go. Last question. When it comes to there's a chai that you have, the chai hot chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what inspired that? Because I'm kind of dying over that and the Shatavari Rose latte.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone loves a good chai. Um, and it's a great way to bring digestive boosting spices into a little drink, a warming drink. And it's really simple to do. In fact, we've been snowshoeing the last week or so up here in the mountains, and I always pack a big thermos of it because it gives you that good internal warmth. But cacao powder or cocoa powder can be really heating. So I started playing around with, they're not even plant cousins, but they have a similar kind of hearty, rich taste to it. I've been using carob powder. So for someone who feels sensitive to the stimulating effects of chocolate, of cacao, carob is a fun alternative in that recipe. And so it uses just ground spices, cinnamon, coriander, excuse me, not coriander, although that probably would be pretty good. Cinnamon, cardamom, a little ginger, and a little clove. Usually what you would find in a chai mix. And then you blend that up with a hot milk of your choice, and you can add a little bit of maple syrup to sweeten to it. And it just makes a really nice, simple hot chocolate. It's just a fun, warming wintertime recipe and a great way to play around with spices. Also, kid
Mm.
approved.
Also kid approved. The last one I want to talk about is just in case my listener is listening to this spring or summer. The Rehydration lemonade blows my mind. And it totally satisfies the raw, formerly anorexic girl. 4 cups of warm water, half a cup of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of raw honey, half a teaspoon of ground turmeric, and 1/4 teaspoon of mineral salt. Combine all of the ingredients in a large quart-sized mason jar. Seal with a lid. Shake it well. Obviously, dissolve the honey and salt, and then place in the fridge. And it keeps for like 2 to 3 days. It's such a nice drink to have around. Obviously, not in the winter time, but in the summer, spring, I can't even. It's so good.
It's so good. You know, I
So good.
I remember as a kid, I grew up on like Lunchables and Go-Gurts and these funny little packaged
Dude,
foods,
same.
and
I
of
would
them,
pray for Lunchables. My mother would make me bologna sandwiches on Thomas's English muffins, and she would put in a granola bar that actually my kid really likes still, which is not terrible.
Nature's Valley.
And exact no, not Nature's Valley. No, I was not a fan. It's the Quaker one, the
Oh,
chocolate chip.
totally.
It's really good. Anyway, he eats boxes of those. But I would beg her for Lunchables, and luckily she was I mean, luckily now. Then I was just pissed. All I wanted was those little plastic containers where everything was organized into, and little did I know they were disgusting. I bought them once just to like see what I was all freaked out about and
Oh,
why I
they're so
wanted them.
bad. They're so
They're so
bad.
bad. They're so bad.
So, like
Oh my
with that,
god.
remember the neon yellow Gatorade?
Yeah.
This is like the ode to your childhood Gatorade, except instead of high fructose corn syrup and yellow 5, you get turmeric, which makes it this beautiful, vibrant yellow.
Right.
And then a little pinch of
And
salt.
anti-inflammatory properties and soothing for almost every system of your body.
Exactly. And it reduces excess heat. It has some of that astringent taste and quality to it. So, a little bit of turmeric, a little bit of sweetness to help your body take up that nutrition, and then a pinch of salt, because salt actually helps to rebalance the kidneys if they've been dehydrated. So, you might even be drinking too much water in the day and always feeling thirsty, or just like most of us, not drinking enough. And this little rehydration drink is great when you're feeling so thirsty but you just can't seem to get enough water. And
Yeah.
my boyfriend's a endurance athlete. He does ultra marathons, and so I always make this drink when he comes back from a run, and it's amazing how effective it is. Super simple to do. Again, little simple shifts that you can make without having to transform everything you do.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. There's so much in here. I could just go on about the rest of this for days, but I'm just going to say to my listener, pick up this book, Living Ayurveda. If you're feeling like you're really bored with how you're cooking and you're feeling like you're bored with even the cookbooks that you have or the recipes that you're working with, just get this book. It's beautiful. You'll be happy. I have it on my special bookshelf. I don't even have it with the cookbooks. I have it in the living room. Someday you'll come over and you'll see it because it goes with all the other beautiful, I have Athena's book. Athena
That's a
Calderon
great
is a really
one.
good friend of mine. It goes with all of those things.
I love that.
So beautiful. So, listener, grab this book, Claire Ragozzino, vidyaliving.com. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Claire. And more soon. And as soon as the coast is clear, girl, we are hanging out.
Please, I would love that. I cannot
My
wait
word.
for real people time.
Yes. Thank you. And we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.